හරිම සුමුදුයි.
Tonight on First at 9 this Friday, the 17th of November 2023. Hilton upgrade. 9 expressions of interest for the divestiture of Hilton Hotel. Debt bet. CBSL chief confirms that debt deal with China's Exim Bank will open up more IMF funding. SOE potential. Former Director Central Bank intimates that State Bank recapitalization will help SOE restructure. PMI spike. Sri Lanka's PMI spike in October, indicating strong growth.
ඔබේ විශ්වාසය දිනු සෙන්සුරයින් දැන් ළඟමැති ෆාමසියෙන් ලබාගත හැක.
This is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and a warm welcome to you to AdaDerana's English News First at 9. I'm Jonathan Benedict. Let's take a look at our stories for the evening, starting with our top story right now. Central Bank Governor Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe says that terms of a $4.2 billion debt deal reached with China were shared by the government among other creditors in a bid to pave the way for more funding from the International Monetary Fund. During an interview in Colombo, the governor went on to say that the official creditors committee led by Japan, India and the Paris Club of Nations will now propose an agreement to restructure Sri Lanka's debt.
Central Bank Governor Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe said that the government has shared the terms of a $4.2 billion debt deal with other creditors, a key sticking point which countries like India, paving the way for more loans from the International Monetary Fund. During an interview in Colombo, Governor Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe said that he hopes the official creditors committee, which is led by Japan, India and the Paris Club of Nations, will now propose an agreement to restructure Sri Lanka's debt. The governor expects that it will allow the IMF to approve a payout of $330 million before the end of the year. Sri Lanka's recent debt deal with the Export-Import Bank of China caught the IMF and creditor nations such as India by surprise, with some officials raising concerns about the lack of transparency over the agreement. China, which is Sri Lanka's biggest bilateral lender, is not part of the official creditors committee. Veerasinghe said details of the China agreement have now been shared with the creditor committee and the IMF. He said that Sri Lanka hopes that official creditors will also respond with their support so that the country can go ahead with the IMF's funding program. Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe went on to state that Sri Lanka is trying to reach a debt restructuring agreement with its bilateral creditors and bondholders to allow it to keep receiving uninterrupted fund tranches under a $3 billion bailout package with the IMF. The bailout package is expected to help further stabilize the economy after the worst crisis in 7 decades last year, which forced the nation to default on its debt for the first time in its history. The CBSL governor said that Sri Lanka is moving in the right direction in achieving these goals. During the interview, he also highlighted that Sri Lanka is well in line with targets set out in the IMF program, including building foreign exchange reserves and central bank credit to the government. He further expressed his interest in seeing an increase of reserves to about 3 months of import cover, but may not be as much as the IMF is recommending, as the country intends to eventually move toward a fully floating exchange rate status quo. CBSL governor also said that monetary policy transmission would speed up and that the gap between policy and market rates would narrow once uncertainties over debt restructuring are cleared.
The former director of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, Dr. Roshan Pereira, says that the government's proposal to recapitalize state-owned banks will allow banks to engage in banking operations beneficial for the economic growth of the country. Speaking to Indivari Amuwatta in our daily program at Hyde Park, Dr. Pereira further said that the recapitalization was also mentioned in the report of the International Monetary Fund. She further elaborated that the recapitalization of state-owned banks will enable state-owned enterprises do away with unpaid debts and operate on earning profits, which will also be beneficial to the SOE restructuring process.
Why do we really need to recapitalize state-owned banks in the country?
Because we know for many years losses that the state-owned enterprises have been racking up, like the CEB, the CPC, and Sri Lankan Airlines. The losses have really been parked in these banks. So as a result, these banks, their balance sheets are basically constrained, or they are not able to lend, for other activities because their capital has been constrained by the losses of the SAVs have been parked in their bank. Recapitalization is really basically where the government takes over or pays off those debts of the SOEs, cleans up the balance sheets of the state banks, and then basically they release them really to do the banking activity for the rest of the economy. But once it is recapitalized, we can't go to business as usual in the state bank. They have to be managed and they have to be run in a way that is beneficial to the rest of the economy. So they can't be again financing source for government and the state-owned enterprises. They have to lend according to some kind of criteria on which they lend. So I think the same kind of governance structure needs to come into these state banks, and I think that is where this whole thing of divesting some of the shares of the state banks come in. And once they go public or once they're listed, they have much more stringent requirements. Of course, now they are still regulated by the central bank, so they do come under a framework which is applicable to all banks. But I think the governance structures and governance framework has to be strengthened so that they operate like any other private bank.
Don't you think this will also add another burden on the taxpayers?
If you read the IMF staff report, which was put out in March 2023, there was an allocation of, I think, 6% of GDP for bank recapitalization. And I think that's going to come from the multilateral agencies. So it will probably come with a very concessional financing over a longer period. So even though it looks like, the budget deficit is going to increase because of that, but I think the modalities of how this is going to be financed will be very different to the financing of, the rest of the budget.
And how will this also, the recapitalization process, support state-owned enterprises?
Now, if you look at the state-owned enterprises and you look at their balance sheet, there's nobody who's going to even look at them. They have such huge losses and their debts have racked up to such a high level. And also, if you look at, even if they are on making operating profits, which some of them are, but not all, their financial losses, the financial costs are so high. So if you clean up their debts, at least they can start from, hopefully making operating profits and overall profits, but also to make it more transparent. Because now what happens is they may be showing profits in 1 year, losses in 1 year, but actually the entire burden of that is not reflected in the government's budget because it's hidden somewhere in the state bank balance sheet. Here what they're saying is, say you have to give have to give a concessionary rate for some utility, or then whatever the losses they make there has to be reflected in the government's budget. It can't be hidden away in some bank balance sheet. You have to be upfront. Call this public service obligations. There are certain things that the government has to provide, maybe. But then you have to cost that, and that cost has to be reflected directly in the budget so that everybody is aware. So I think that's another reason why it is important to clear these balance sheets and then start from that point where it's more transparent.
Representatives of the International Atomic Energy Agency said that relevant support to establish a legal framework to govern the use of nuclear energy in Sri Lanka will be provided as requested, adding that discussions with relevant departments pertaining to this will take place throughout the week. To this end, Chairman of the Sri Lankan Atomic Agency Energy Board, Professor S.R.D. Rosa, stated that a small nuclear power plant, specifically a floating power plant built on a ship, will be established in Sri Lanka with the aid of nations such as Russia, Denmark and France. 5 representatives, including the head of the Nuclear and Treaty Laws section at the International Atomic Energy Agency, Anthony Weatherall, arrived in Sri Lanka recently to hold discussions on the preparation of the required legislation to govern the use of nuclear energy in Sri Lanka. The representatives were to hold talks with the Sri Lanka Atomic Energy Board and the Sri Lanka Atomic Energy Regulatory Council and provide guidance to the institutes who compose the relevant legislation.
අන්තර්ජාතික පරමාණු බල ශක්ති මණ්ඩලයෙන් විශේෂඥයෝ වෙලා තියෙනවා 4 දෙනෙක් මේ කරන්න හදන්නේ මේ අලුත් පනතක් අපේ පද්ධතියට ඇතුළත් කරන්න. න්‍යෂ්ටික බලාගාරයක් කියන්නේ න්‍යෂ්ටික බෝම්බයක් නෙමෙයි. දැන් ජපානයේ තමයි අන්තිමනෝ සිදු න්‍යෂ්ටික බලාගාර අනතුරු වුණේ. ඒක කවුරුත් මැරුන්නේ නැහැ. දැන් ඒ බලාගාර සේරම දෙවෙනි පරම්පරාවේ බලාගාර. දැන් 4 වෙනි පරම්පරාවේ බලාගාර තියෙන්නේ. ඉතින් ඒක නිසා විද්‍යාඥයෝ සහ ඉංජිනේරුවරු සහ ඒ විශේෂඥයෝ ඒ වලින් පාඩම් ඉගෙනගෙන දැන් හදනවා ඉස්සරහට පුංචි පුංචි බලාගාර. එක නැවක තියෙන්නේ පාවෙන බලාගාරේ අවුරුදු 12කට ඉන්ධන දාන්න ඕනේ නැහැ. ඊළඟට තව අවුරුදු 12ක් භාවිතා කරලා අවුරුදු 24 ඉඳන් නැවත එක්කම යනවා. ඉතින් ඒක නිසා අපිට භූමියේ ඒ නියුක්ලියර් වේස්ට් එක එහෙම නැත්නම් න්‍යෂ්ටික අපද්‍රව්‍ය අපිට බාර ගන්න අවශ්‍ය වෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඉතින් ඒක ඇත්ත ඇතන.
Meanwhile, the need for a stable and continuous power supply for future development projects of the country were also highlighted.
ඉස්සරහට අපි කතා කරනවා පෝට් සිටි නැදුලියෙන් අපි දුවන්න ඕන දුම්රිය. ඒතර හැම එකටම විදුලිය අවශ්‍ය. න්‍යෂ්ටික බලයෙන් අපි විදුලිය නිෂ්පාදනය කරොත් අපිට අර ස්ථාවර ප්‍රභවයක් තියෙනවා. ඇමතිතුමත් අපිට කිව්වේ මේකට අභිලාෂය ප්‍රකාශ කිරීමේ යෝජනාවලියක් සකස් කරන්න. අපි කියන EOI කියලා. රටකින් ගත්තොත් සමහරවිට ප්‍රශ්නයක් එන්න පුළුවන්. අයියා අපි රටේ රට තෝරගත්තී. ඒතර සමහරවිට භූදේශපාලනය අනුව ප්‍රශ්න ඇති වෙන්න පුළුවන් අපි වගේ පුංචි රටකට. මම කිව්වා රුසියාව තියෙනවා, ඩෙන්මාර්කය, ප්‍රංශය ඉතාමත් න්‍යෂ්ටික ශක්තියෙන් ඉතාම ඉහළ තැනකින් ඒගොල්ලොත් එක්කත් අපි කතා කරලා තියෙනවා. ඒතර ඒගොල්ලෝ 2028 29 වෙනකොට ඔය පුංචි බලාගාර හදනවා. ඊළඟට ඉංගලන්තයේ දැන් ව්‍යාපෘතියක් පටන් ගන්න තියෙනවා. ඒතකොට ඒ අනුව අපිට යම්කිසි රටකින් විදුලි බලාගාරයක් ඉස්සරහට ඒ යෝජනාවලිය ඒගොල්ලෝ කැමති වුණොත් අපිට ඒක සම්බන්ධ කරගන්න පුළුවන්.
In the meantime, representatives of the International Atomic Energy Agency says discussions pertaining to building a strong legal framework for nuclear energy in Sri Lanka are currently underway.
During the course of this week, we will be having extensive discussions with senior officials and the various departments and stakeholders that have an interest in ensuring the country has a robust legal framework. Upon request is providing legislative assistance, which we do through the IEA's Technical Cooperation Programme.
Minister of Power and Energy Kanchana Wijayasekara held talks with representatives of the International Atomic Energy Agency today. In an ex message, the minister said that the government intends to include the safe use of nuclear energy as a part of the long-term electricity generation plans and will call for expressions of interest for establishing nuclear power plants and modern technology. Further, the government's policy for nuclear energy safety program and public awareness programs were discussed at length. Despite this being day 4 of the budget debate, the hot topic of the day circled around the suspended chairman of the Committee on Public Enterprise, Professor Ranjit Bandara, and allegations of misconduct with parliamentary staff. While this issue took prominence, Minister Harin Fernando concurrently invited MPs who owned lands that have been worked on by farmers, particularly in the south, to be conveyed to them permanently.
අඩුම තරමින් මේ කමිටුවල සභාපතිත්වයේ දරන පුද්ගලයන් සාමාන්‍ය භාවිතය ඇති සරල හස්ත සංඥාවල අර්ථයවත් එයට ඉගැන්වීම ගරු කතානායකතුමා සතු වගකීමක් හැටියට මම මේ අවස්ථාවේ ඉදිරිපත් කරන්නට කැමැතියි. ඒ වගේම රංජිත් බණ්ඩාර මහතාගේ ක්‍රියාකලාපයේ පිළිබඳව බොහොම බරපතල ප්‍රකාශයක් ශ්‍රී ලංකා විගණන සේවා සංගමයේ විසින් ඒ දක්වා ඇති කරුණු වල පැහැදිලිවම තිබෙනවා. මම ඒක හස්සාත්ගත කරනවා.
කෝප් කමිටුවේ හිටපු සභාපතිවරයෙක් මට දැන් මේ නිලධාරීතුමියක් එතුමියට ලිංගික වශයෙන් හිංසනයට ලක් කරා කියලා ඉවර වෙලා දැඩි චෝදනාවක් කරනවා. මේ පිළිබඳව කාන්තා සංසදයේ සභාපතිතුමියක් දැනුවත් කළා තියෙනවා. ඒ නිසා මේ තරම් පහත් තැනකට මේක යටත් ගිහිල්ලා තියෙද්දි තීන්දුවක් ගන්නේ නැතේ ඇයි කියන ප්‍රශ්නේ තියෙන නිසා කටයුතු කරන්න කියලා ගෞරවයෙන් ඉල්ලනවා.
මේ කෝප් කමිටුවට තියෙන පිළිගැනීම සමාජය ඇතුලේ අහෝසි වෙන පරිදි අපි දෙපැත්තෙම කවුරු හරි වැඩ කරන එක නවත්තන්න ඕන.
අපි බෙදෙනවා වෙනුවට මේ ගම්වල දුක් විඳින මිනිසුන්ට වගාවක් කරගෙන ජීවත් වීමට තියෙන අයිතිය ලබා දීම අපේ යුතුයකම. ඒ නිසා මේ යුතුයකම ඉටු කිරීමට ජනාධිපතිතුමා පහුගිය අයවැයේදීත් එතුමා ඉඩම් කෑලි සින්නක්කර වශයෙන් ජනතාවට ලබා දීමත් කෘෂි ඉඩම් ඕනතරම් ලබා දෙන්නටත් අපිට අවසර දීලා තියෙනවා. ඒ නිසා මම කැමැති නැවතවතාවක් ඔබතුමාලට ආරාධනා කරන්න අපි දේශපාලන ප්‍රශ්නයක් කරගන්නේ නැතුව, ජාති ප්‍රශ්නයක් කරගන්නේ නැතුව, ආගම් ප්‍රශ්නයක් කරගන්නේ නැතුව මම කැමැති බදාදා දවසේ ඔබතුමාලා නිදහස් නම් උදෑසන 10ට ඉඩම් අමාත්‍යාංශයට සම්බන්ධ වෙන්න. අපි මේකට පැහැදිලි තීන්දුවක් I would like to invite you also to participate so we can all discuss how we can go further and සමහර කොමිටි සහ තීරණ හරියට ක්‍රියාත්මක වෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඒක මම පිළිගන්නවා. මේ කොමිටි දාලා කවදාවත් මේක විසඳන්න බෑ. ඔබතුමාගේ ප්‍රශ්නයට තිරසාර විසඳුමක් ලබා දෙන්නට අපි සියලු දෙනා කටයුතු කරමු කියලා ඉල්ලීමක්.
Staying on topic in a rather stunning move, Speaker Mahinda Yapa Abewardena informed the House today that the Committee on Public Enterprises, or COPE, will not convene for meetings until further notice. The Speaker stated this in response to a question raised by Opposition Leader Sajid Premadasa during day 4 of the ongoing debate on the second reading of the 2024 Appropriation Bill. COPE Chairman Professor Ranjit Bandara was questioned for his conduct at the latest committee meeting, for which officials of Sri Lanka cricket were summoned for inquiries. Later, the presence of Professor Bandara's son, Kanishka Bandara, at the said meeting threw further controversy onto the ensuing issue. However, the COPE chairman defended his actions in a clarification issued, saying that his son serves as his coordinating secretary. Professor Bandara said that his son was permitted to attend the meeting by the Assistant Sergeant-at-Arms at his request. However, the Speaker informed Parliament yesterday that an investigation would be conducted into the matter. Additionally, the COPE chairman was accused by the opposition leader, saying that Professor Bandara served as a consultant for SLC on the Kandy Cricket Campus project, apart from other consultancy firms owned by him which provide services to the ongoing governing cricket body. Sri Lanka is expected to receive the second disbursement of the extended funding facility provided by the International Monetary Fund by December. Minister of Ports, Shipping and Civil Aviation Nimad Siripala de Silva said this speaking at a media briefing at the Presidential Media Centre this morning. In his remarks, the minister underscored the significance of the current budget, portraying it as the inception of an initiative aimed to revitalise the national economy, devoid of immediate benefits. He added that the disbursement of the second tranche of the IMF program is thereby anticipated by December, given that Budget 2024 lays out a comprehensive, long-term initiative aimed at reviving the national economy. Moving on to other news, former Deputy Inspector General of the Criminal Investigation Department, Ravi Seneviratne, has stated to an Australian television service that the investigation into the Easter Sunday attack was hampered by the influence of the former government. He said that after the new government came into power in 2019, former President Gotabaya Rajapaksa removed his team from investigating the Easter Sunday attack that took place in April of 2019.
Australia's ABC network aired a special investigative documentary about the Easter Sunday attack that took place in Sri Lanka in 2019. Joining the program, former DIG Ravi Seneviratne, who led the investigation into the Easter Sunday terror attack, said that his team was immediately removed from the investigation without any notice. The former DIG further stated that some intelligence officers maintaining relations with Muslim extremist groups hindered the investigations.
A political plot by a group of people at the top. So that is why we have been clamoring and asking for a transparent investigation which is free, which is not guided by politicians.
He said that if proper information had been given regarding the killing of 2 constables at a police post in Vaunathu 6 months before the Easter Sunday attack, it could have prevented the Easter Sunday attack. Further, with the help of American FBI intelligence services, a discovery was made that constant communication had transpired between the National Tawheed Jamaat terrorists who carried out the attack on Easter Sunday and the military intelligence mechanism through an email on a constant basis. He also claimed that intelligence officers prevented the interrogation of those who were close to the suicide bombers on 2 occasions, saying that it would affect national security.
එවැනි අවස්ථාවල ඒ සම්බන්ධතාවයන් තියෙන පුද්ගලයන් කැඳවීමේදී සහ ඔවුන්ගෙන් ප්‍රශ්න කිරීමේදී යම් බාධා කිරීම සිදු වුණා.
We want the Australian government and all governments of the world to help us to find out what really happened to these 273 people.
2,519 newly recruited nurses were handed their letters of appointment today. According to the Ministry of Health, the appointment letters were handed over during an event held under the patronage of Prime Minister Dinesh Gunawardena. The student nurses who received their letters of appointment were registered for the academic year 2018 and commenced training in January 2020. They successfully completed their academic year and received letters of appointment during the event. Furthermore, the Health Ministry highlighted the total number of nursing officers in the country's health service will now add up to 45,000 with these new recruits. President Ranil Wickremesinghe extended an invitation to the Sinhalese and Tamil diaspora to consider investing in new universities in Sri Lanka to support the rebuilding of the future of the nation. Speaking during the 10th commemoration of the late educationist and founder of D.S. Senanayaka College, RIT Alas, the President announced the implementation of the English for All program in all schools and universities across the island by 2030. President Wickremesinghe also emphasized the importance of expanding language knowledge beyond Sinhalese and Tamil.
අද අපි අධ්‍යාපනය ගැන සාකච්ඡා කරනවා. මමත් අධ්‍යාපනය ඇමති හිටියේ. අපි ඔක්කොම කියන්නේ අධ්‍යාපනය අපි දෙමු කියලා සිංහලෙන් උයි දෙමළ භාෂාවෙන්. සිංහල උවමනයි දෙමළ උවමනයි. ඒකට සීමා කරන්න බෑ. හුඟක් අය ඉංග්‍රීසි ඉල්ලනවාද? දැන් ඉංග්‍රීසි නෙමෙයි ජපන් ඉගෙන ගන්නවා, චීන ඉගෙන ගන්නවා, අරාබි භාෂාව ඉගෙන ගන්නවා, කොරියන් භාෂාව ඉගෙන ගන්නවා. අපිට මේක භාෂා දෙකකට අපි සීමා කරලා ඉන්න බෑ. විශේෂයෙන්ම අපේ අධ්‍යාපන ඇමතුමා කතා කළා 20-30 වෙනකොට සැමටම ඉංග්‍රීසි කියන වැඩසටහන තියෙනවා. මම බැලුවේ විශ්වවිද්‍යාලවලත් අපි ඉංග්‍රීසි ඇතුළත් කරනවා. දෙවනුව තියෙන්නේ අපේ උසස් අධ්‍යාපන ක්‍රමය. අපි කොච්චර නිදහස් අධ්‍යාපනය කිව්වත් කී දෙනෙක් රට යනවද? මං හිතන්නේ ඇතුල් වෙන සංඛ්‍යාවට සමාන සංඛ්‍යාවක් පිට යනවා. සමහරු කියනවා නිදහස් අධ්‍යාපනය කියන්නේ මුදල් දෙන එක විශ්වවිද්‍යාලයට ගෙවන්න කියලා. අනික් රටවල එහෙම නෙමෙයි නිදහස් අධ්‍යාපනය. එතනදී ශිෂ්‍යයාට මුදල් දෙනවා අධ්‍යාපන ගෙනියන්න. ණය පහසුකම් දෙනවා නැත්නම් ණයයි මුදලුයි දෙකම දෙන්න. ඒකට ශිෂ්‍යයාට අයිතියක් තියෙනවා තමන් කැමති විෂය තමන් කැමති විශ්වවිද්‍යාලේ තෝරගන්න. අපිත් බලනවා ශිෂ්‍යයන්ට අවස්ථාව දෙන්න. කොහොමද මේ රටේ තියෙන විශ්වවිද්‍යාල සංඛ්‍යාව වැඩි කරන්න ඕන. දැන් තියෙන විශ්වවිද්‍යාල අමතක කරනව නෙමෙයි. දැන් තියෙන විශ්වවිද්‍යාල ප්‍රමිතිය වැඩි කරන්න ඕන. ලංකාවෙන් පිට වුණ දෙමළ ඩයස්පෝරාවටයි සිංහල ඩයස්පෝරාවටයි මම කියනවා කරුණාකරලා විශ්වවිද්‍යාල ආරම්භ කරන්න. රට ගැන කැක්කුමක් තියෙනවනේ. සිංහල ජනතාව ගැන කැක්කුමක් තියෙනවනේ. ද්‍රවිඩ ජනතාව ගැන කැක්කුමක් තියෙනවනේ.
During the Grade 5 scholarship examination for the 2023 academic year, 5 students excelled with brilliant performances, achieving the highest mark of 198. A total of 332,949 candidates sat for the examination and 50,664 candidates managed to pass the cut-off mark, thus indicating a 15.22% pass rate. Pardon me.
The Grade 5 scholarship examination for the academic year 2023 was held on the 15th of October this year, with a total of 332,949 candidates sitting for the examination. According to the Department of Examinations, 198 is considered as the highest mark which could be achieved in this examination. 5 outstanding students managed to achieve this mark during this year's Grade 5 scholarship examination. 50,664 candidates out of all candidates who sat for the examination managed to secure the pass mark, which indicates that 15.22% of all candidates passed the examination. The Department of Examinations highlighted that this percentage has seen an increase compared to that of the previous year. The department further stated that the period starting from the 27th of November to the 4th of December will be allocated for the submission of appeals for recorrection online.
Welcome back. 9 expressions of interest have been submitted for the divestiture of Hilton Hotel Developers Lanka Limited. The government, through the Ministry of Finance, Economic Stabilisation and National Policies, made the announcement on the 9th of October 2023. The deadline for submissions of proposals ended at 2 p.m. yesterday. The EOIs received were considered by the opening committee appointed by the Special Cabinet-appointed Negotiating Committee. According to the media release issued by the State-Owned Enterprises Restructuring Unit today, 9 EOIs were received and will be evaluated per the special guidelines on divestiture of state-owned enterprises approved by the Cabinet of Ministers in July of 2023. Collier's International Consultancy and Valuation Pte Limited and its advisory partner Platinum Advisors Pte Limited as transaction advisors for the divestiture of Hotel Developers Lanka Limited will continue to advise the government of Sri Lanka. In some good news, Sri Lanka's Purchasing Managers Index for the month of October rose to an index value of 49.5 from 45.7 a month earlier. The services sector PMI for the month of October showed an index value of 56.2, indicating a continued expansion in services activities.
The Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index showed an increase in October 2023, recording an index value of 49.5. Considering the sub-indices, new orders and stock of purchasers increased during the month, while production and employment remained contracted. New orders expanded during the month, driven by manufacture of textiles and wearing apparel sector, mainly attributable to seasonal demand. Employment continued to decrease on a month-on-month basis, as most of the firms only recruit to fulfill the empty space created by resignations and retirements. Meanwhile, suppliers' delivery time shortened to a slower pace during the month of October compared to the previous month. In a global level, PMI recorded a value of 48.8 in October 2023, with a decrease of 0.4 index points from September. Manufacturing PMIs of India, Singapore and Russia improved at a slower pace in October 2023, while it remained at a neutral level in USA compared to the previous month. However, manufacturing PMIs of Eurozone, UK and China deteriorated in October 2023 compared to the previous month. In the services sector, PMI recorded an index value of 56.2 in October 2023, indicating a continued expansion in the services activities. New businesses increased in October 2023 compared to September 2023, particularly with the increases observed in financial services, wholesale and retail trade, other personal activities and insurance subsectors. Business activities also expanded at a higher pace in October 2023, attributable to positive developments in most of the subsectors. Meanwhile, backlogs of work and employment contracted during the month. On a global level, services PMI posted 50.4 in October 2023, signaling an expansion in global services activities. Services PMIs of China, India, US and Japan indicated that their services sectors expanded in October 2023 compared to the previous month, while services PMI of UK indicated a deterioration in their service activities.
The Colombo Stock Exchange closed in red today, weighed down by losses in communication services and consumer discretionary stocks. The Colombo Stock Exchange all-share price index settled down 0.46%, ending at 10,613.11 points, sliding for 4 straight sessions. For the week, the index fell 2.38%, snapping 2 weeks of gains prior to that. Ceylon Beverage Holdings plc and Dialogue Axiata plc were the top losers on the CSE ASPI, falling 17.24% and 3.23% respectively. Trading volume on the CSE all-share price index fell to 38.4 million shares from 68.4 million shares in the previous session. The S&P SL20 meanwhile dropped 0.35% to close at 2,996.86 points. Market turnover fell to 873.8 million rupees from 1.06 billion rupees in the previous session. The food, beverage and tobacco sector were the top contributor to market turnover, while the banking sector was the second highest contributor. Foreign investors were net sellers, offloading stocks worth 105.8 million rupees, while domestic investors were net buyers, purchasing shares worth 810.8 million rupees. With that, let's take a look at how the rupee traded against other major currencies during the day. Welcome back. Distilleries Company of Sri Lanka plc has signed a sales and purchase agreement with Heineken Asia Pacific Pte Limited today. Under the agreement, Heineken will sell all its shares in Heineken Lanka Limited to distilleries and agreed to trademark license agreements for Heineken's international brand portfolio in Sri Lanka, comprising of Heineken, Tiger and Anchor.
Distilleries Company of Sri Lanka plc has signed a sales and purchase agreement with Heineken Asia Pacific Private Limited today. Heineken will sell all its shares in Heineken Lanka Limited to distilleries and agree to trademark license agreements for Heineken's international brand portfolio in Sri Lanka, comprising of Heineken, Tiger and Anchor. The firm said through the combined knowledge and expertise in production and distribution of liquor in the Sri Lankan market, the firm will be able to deliver quality beer brands at scale, providing more choice and an exceptional experience to consumers in Sri Lanka. Leading corporate and marketing communications professionals launched the Public Relations Association of Sri Lanka in the progression of practice of public relations as an industry in Sri Lanka. Membership in the association is open to PR and corporate communications professionals, press officers from the public sector, academics teaching the subject, and graduates of PR, marketing and communications who are currently engaged in PR practice or teaching. The association has 3 categories of members: professional, associate and graduate.
With that wraps up all the news I have for you for this evening. Join us again tomorrow. I'm Jonathan Benedict. Have a blessed weekend ahead. Good night.